It's connecting.
All right.
And again, awkward couple of seconds in the beginning. Okay, and we are live. And again, and let me mute that. All right.
Oh, yes.
Welcome to Hire Club. I'm Diantha, Hire Club's Director of Coaching. And with me today is one of our new coaches, Dave Wolovsky. Did I say that right? Wolovsky.
Yeah, Wolovsky.
We're going to be talking about how hard it can be to ask for what you want, like a raise or a promotion, and what you can do about it. But thanks for being with me here today, Dave.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why don't we start by having you tell me a little bit about yourself and why this topic is important to you?
Okay, yeah. So basically, I'm a pay raise coach. So I help people who are doing really high quality work, but it's not leading to higher salaries or timely advancement, to set them up to ask for raises, get promoted, and possibly sometimes have to, move to a new job. But this all kind of started about 8 years ago. I used to, before this, be a teacher, curriculum designer. And I worked at like this firm for a while that designed curriculums for schools and trained teachers and did some trainings for companies on leadership and stuff like that. And my boss at the time, who I won't mention their name, would basically sort of trash talk deliverables. And when anything was like 1% imperfect, it was just like, oh, he would be pointing things out all the time that were negative. And I felt really scared, really stressed out. I felt like my job was always on thin ice. And I kind of felt like I wasn't good at what I did. And it ate at me. And so at one point I just kind of felt like, what is this? Like, what am I doing? I can't really take it anymore. But I didn't want to quit yet. So I knew I had to interrupt the pattern somehow. And basically I scheduled a meeting with him, and just as diplomatically as possible, I basically was like, it feels like my work is not hitting the target for you somehow. I just wanted to bring this up to see what your thoughts are. So I basically asked for like an informal performance evaluation. And he looked at me and he was kind of shocked. And he was like, what do you mean? You do great work. Like, what are you talking about? And I was like, and then I was the one who was shocked. I was like, okay, thank you for telling me that. It's a little surprising, to be honest, because you usually point out all these flaws in everything I do. And he was like, yeah, well, I have high standards and I don't have patience for anything less than that. And I know it can be hard. And so this just very short conversation, I don't remember the rest of it, but it was kind of opened things up. Just his acknowledgement of me and his acknowledgement of himself and this dynamic that was happening. Even though he didn't apologize for it, I kind of got something, the relationship shifted a little bit. And it just kind of made him a little softer to me going forward. It made me take his criticism less personally. And so work was actually just more enjoyable. Eventually what ended up happening was the company, one of the reasons why he was kind of sort of toxic in this way was, it was partly a personality thing, but partly the company was not doing so well and he was under increasing pressure. So at some point I kind of realized it was good to start looking for other jobs anyway. And eventually I quit. But my time before that, before quitting, was significantly more enjoyable, just because of that conversation. And so at that time, I was also already doing positive psychology coaching, like life coaching. And I realized that, this kind of, first of all, there's a lot of power in conversations, in having really strategic and what feel like high stakes conversations, to really break through and change dynamics in relationships. And I realized that this was a lot more common than I had thought, meaning, not necessarily just having a toxic boss, but the more people I talked to and the more clients I had, the more I realized that all bosses are intimidating for different reasons. Some are critical like this, some are kind of hard to read, cold. Some are just really good at what they do and kind of like are very firm, and you're like, whoa, I could never be like them. And that's intimidating in itself. But I realized that because they're all intimidating and we're the only ones who can really shift the dynamic and get out of that and like make it better for us to work for them. And that makes it better for them too, obviously. So, you know, stepping into our full power happens from these really subtle conversations. And that's like got me really passionate about helping people build these relationships, helping them step into their power, and just, you know, get rid of imposter syndrome. That's sort of a buzzword, but just be able to create relationships with these people who are intimidating and who are important to us, and we see a lot, and like our work matters to them, and you know, and their approval matters to us. And so kind of going down that path little by little, I went from like relationships with bosses to realizing that the results of improving those relationships led to people getting raises, promotions more quickly. And I realized like, well, that's what people really want anyway. Like, I mean, they want better relationships, but they also want the end result outcome of that, which is genuine appreciation for their work, which, you know, at work is shown you know, by getting a raise, getting a promotion. So that's kind of the long story of how I got here.
Okay. So it's all about the relationship then. Ultimately, that's what helps people to have the confidence to be able to ask for more or to get the support they need. So aside from having an intimidating boss, what are some other things that kind of get in the way of people asking for what they need or asking for a promotion, a raise? What do you think?
Mm-hmm. I mean, so I did mention the word imposter syndrome, which to me means basically you are afraid of someone saying something that's going to make you look like a fake, like a fraud, or asking you a question that you don't have the answer to, and sort of showing that you are not smart or something like that, right? So that's the imposter syndrome, is like, and a lot of people have it. The word imposter syndrome gets thrown around a lot, but I also think a lot of people have it. I think almost everyone has it to varying degrees. So, you know, one thing that I'll talk to people about is what is that thing? Like, it's very vulnerable to actually acknowledge it yourself and acknowledge it to someone else, even a coach who's supporting you. But like, what is the thing that you're really afraid of people pointing out about you or saying or asking that feels like it would crumble you? Because often we don't even consciously think through it, really. We just have it somewhere in there, and we don't really want to touch it because we're like, if we don't touch it, maybe no one else will notice. So sort of different forms of that often hold people back, because if you ask for more, you're going to be seen more, right? So that gets in the way a lot, I would say, as well.
Sure, yeah. And if you're seen more, then people are paying more attention to what you do. And then if you make a mistake, what might happen? I know I've heard a lot of people talk about that fear of like, well, if I make a mistake, people are going to know I have no idea what I'm doing. It's like, one mistake? No, it'll be fine. But I'm sure you kind of that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it is, the good thing is, like, I think when you get deeper into what is the feeling, like there's a hole in your armor, you know, what is that exactly? And then when you start to actually come up with like, well, what if someone did say that to me, or like ask me a question about that I don't feel confident about, and you literally just like come up with your response and you practice it, it actually makes you feel a lot more comfortable and confident, because you've got everything else like covered, you know, or not everything else, but the things that you feel confident about, you don't have to think about. So, but if you practice responding to that little point, it can really open you up. And I'm like physically also, you know, I think we literally our rib cage gets smaller when we're kind of anxious.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you breathe easy as your rib cage is relaxed, so it can actually expand a little bit in your belly too.
Okay, so it's confronting that fear and actually coming up with a response to it.
Yeah, that's one of the other things that I think gets in the way. Yeah. But also, you know, other things too that are like kind of more standard, which would be like knowing what your market value is, or not, you know, it's like, if you don't know that, it's hard to say, well, am I even in the ballpark of where I should be right now? You know?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's like, got to do your homework before you ask for a raise or promotion and
Yeah.
understand what's going to be reasonable or what's not going to be enough. Okay. So, at a high level, while respecting confidentiality, can you share some examples of clients you've worked with and helped with this issue?
Yeah. So I can think of two. I want to share two actually that are kind of on opposite ends of the spectrum in a way, because one of them was a client who was really, he liked negotiation. And he was like, had no imposter syndrome. And he was just like, I'm good at what I do. I want to be recognized for that 100%. But he was also at the same time, he was a very empathic person. He cared a lot about like helping people in need. He spent a lot of his time volunteering. And so basically when we first talked and he first came to me, he said, I think I'm maxed out with my salary. Like I really want to be making more, to be honest, but because, I have commitments and stuff like that, but I feel that I can't get more. I'm really at the top of my industry. And I somehow convinced him that I could show him how to get more. And basically, over a few months, I realized he was really bold and he was down to test out anything I showed him, any phrasing, any techniques, that kind of thing, without hesitation. And so he really learned very quickly. And over a few months, we built up to him asking for a raise and a 4-day work week, which was, yeah, that was kind of, and that was like, he was like, I want this. And I was like, all right, let's ask for it. Even though, it's most people would be like, I could never ask for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was tricky too, because so he's a consultant, and he worked for a hospital as like IT consultant. But so he had a firm that he worked for that was kind of the middle man in all of this. And so the negotiation had a few different prongs to it.
Mm-hmm.
So he had to set it up with his manager at the hospital first and lay the groundwork to ask for more when his contract got extended, because he was pretty sure that it was going to get extended because his manager had said that. So he had a few conversations that we set up to asking, and then he had to eventually just ask the firm for the raise. And so when the time came, they offered him something like $10K more. And he had a few conversations with them and got them up to 35 more. And the 4-day work week, which he was blown away when he got that part. He was like, Dave, I really didn't think this would work, but it's a miracle. It's crazy. So, and I was even a little surprised at how well it worked. Because again, 4-day work week is a tricky thing to do. You have to really set it up right. But so on the other end of the spectrum, I had another client who was high imposter syndrome. She did amazing work. She took on way too much. She's told me at one point, she was like, I always feel like I'm up to here in work. Like this is where the water level is. And it's kind of just not drowning. And she did crazy things. She saved them something like over $1 million by completing a project in-house that they were going to outsource. Would have cost them over $1 million.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, she was always showing people this, what I call her happy to help side, which is just I'm always there, whatever you need, I'll say yes, all of that. And so, we worked on, and she had a lot of anxiety too, right? So we worked on that. And we worked on her setting boundaries without having to say no, because she couldn't say no. So saying no without saying no was a big thing for her. And at one point, after we were working together, they offered her a raise and promotion. She didn't ask for it at that time. And the raise was something like, she worked at a nonprofit, by the way. So the numbers are very different. But the raise that they offered her was about $8,000. And that was something like 10%. And so she wasn't really happy with that. She wanted more, but she still wanted to work there. She didn't want to have to leave. So we prepared a conversation with her boss that pretty much honestly expressed her feelings while still being diplomatic. And they came back a week later with an extra 5K, which was good, you know. And what she basically said, just to give you a little insight window into what she said, she was like, I like my job. I want to keep us moving forward. Here's how I've already been doing it, X, Y, Z. Here's how I can have an even bigger impact in the future. So what's the best you can do here to really match my commitment? And this sort of follows what I call the offer spiral, which is a little framework that I came up with basically by trial and error and, you know, reading a lot. And, you know, it applies to basically any time you are pitching your value to someone, you're trying to get someone to invest in you. So, yeah, so she did that. And actually, she ended up doing the same thing a year later. They offered her something like a 2% raise, no promotion, and she got it up to 10%, and then plus a 4% merit increase, same techniques. And so it's kind of, she's sort of in the habit now. And the percentages, you know, obviously, like if you're making more now, the percent, it compounds. So very satisfying to hear back from her.
Okay. So, and she worked for a nonprofit. That seems like it would be even more challenging, because I know, I mean, I've worked for a nonprofit before too. And, you know, when you're working for a nonprofit, they have fixed budgets. So that's interesting that she was still able to get that much more.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I think it depends on the type of nonprofit.
Sure.
Hers, well, I don't know, I'm not going to go too much into it, but there's a lot of, she was sort of involved in tech, not IT, not software, but sort of design. Yeah, it depends on the department you're working for too, I think.
Okay. No, that's good to know. Okay. And so you've also created a handout to go along with this session so that people can download. Can you tell us some about that?
Yeah, so this is, I call it the 7 steps to doubling your salary. And it's basically, you know, some kind of things that you want to hit while you are working. And it's at different moments in the sort of work journey. The beginning, it gives you some really quick tips about like, how do you actually get the most, you know, maximize your salary by going to a new job, or, you know, that kind of thing. Some strategy there. But then the steps are really about, again, kind of going back to the relationships thing. How do you create really good impressions? How do you manage your relationships? How do you deliver your work in ways that get people really intrigued and excited? And that's a big thing, is like impressing the decision makers. If you're doing that regularly, that raises your value a lot.
Okay. Okay. And just to be clear, when it comes to that handout, it's increasing your salary over a few years. It's not like tomorrow, but it's strategies that for long-term growth. Yes. Yeah,
for sure. You can't, I don't think you can double your salary tomorrow, but that
would be a good trick.
Some people might disagree with me. But yeah, so basically the idea, I mean, it lays out a little sort of example plan if you want to do it in 2-ish years, but, you know, first of all, maximizing your salary isn't necessarily what everyone wants. I think most of us really want to just feel like we're genuinely appreciated at work, and that we feel competent and we feel connected and feel autonomy as well, that we're able to, you know, not be micromanaged. So I think these 3 things are very important, and these steps help with that as well. It's just sort of, if you are really gunning for the salary, that's, you know, you have to have these in place as well. Absolutely.
Okay. So if someone is interested in trying to negotiate a raise, or looking to get promoted, and they didn't know where to start, what's like one step they could take towards like that process of starting to negotiate? What advice would you give them?
Yeah. So the first thing I would usually recommend, without knowing kind of what's holding them back, is how you talk about your work when you deliver it, and your ideas when you're suggesting an idea, that makes a big difference because people don't have a lot of attention, right? So when you're presenting your work to someone who, even if they care about it, they have like 7 seconds or something for them to really decide, like, is this what I want? Is it not? So, and you might have time to explain more to them, but even so, you always want to start with a headline for your work. And a headline, there's many different ways to form a headline. I like this format, which comes from actually a marketing expert. His name's Donald Miller.
Oh, I know.
And you know of him? Yeah, he's an author, became a marketing expert. He's got a great formula for headlines.
Brand, right?
Yeah, story brand, exactly. So the headline is basically 3 parts, and it's problem, solution, result. So you always want to be clear about when you're presenting your work, what is the problem that got you to do the work in the first place? Even if the person knows, if they're your boss, they know why they asked you to do something, right? But reminding them of the problem is always going to just get their attention, like keep their attention a little bit more. And then it connects to what is the type of solution you are presenting. Again, we're talking about headlines, so you don't want to make it long. You want it to be simple, simple, simple. And then the result, which goes, really, it's the result of, usually you want to think of the result of the result. Like, if things go well, then what? Right? And so that's what you want to
$1 million, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, it depends, if it's too far detached, then it won't be believable. But there is usually, if there's more customers going deeper into the funnel or whatever, then we'll have great, more sales, or so the sales team will have it easier. That kind of thing, right? So it's like, who's affected by the work? And it's really who is the most important thing.
Well, and that quantifying part, I mean, I know that that's something that Cathan has talked about when it comes to like resume writing, making sure to add numbers. People like math, right?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. So quantifying, so like going along with the who it is affecting, it sometimes can feel silly to quantify things like number of hours saved, numbers of problems prevented, whatever, but usually people think money saved or earned, extra. But you can save people time. And you can also even translate that into money if, needed. Like, what's the average salary at your company? How many hours of labor are you saving people? That's how much money you've saved the company, right? For them to do on higher impact things. But also, you always want to know your audience. So if you're presenting your work to your boss, they have a preference. They light up at certain ideas. Other people will have a different, preference or a different trigger for their engagement.
Okay. So ultimately, a good starting point is to think about your audience and make sure that you're tailoring your messaging to them, and be able to state the problem, like what happened, I guess, how you solved it, and the result. Yes.
And I think a lot of people, when I first introduced this to them, they completely forget the problem. I'm like, so what did you do for work? What do you do for work in general? Or what did you do? What was this latest project? And they'll just start with, well, here's what I did. And they'll actually usually end at that too. They will forget the problem and the result. And so I'm like, okay, but why did you do that? Like, what's the problem? And even then, sometimes people are like, what? Like, it's really funny how it takes some thought. We're not used to thinking about the problems that we solve or the results that come a little down the line.
No, that's funny. I guess we're just used to saying, this is the thing I did. Don't know why or what happened afterwards, but I did this.
Right.
And I see that a lot on resumes too. But okay.
Yeah.
All right. Any closing thoughts, words of wisdom for our audience?
Let's see. Well, this is something we had sort of talked about before. The idea of how do you know whether you've won or lost a negotiation? Is kind of an interesting one. And I just mentioned it because it's short.
No.
So there's 2 ways. I would say there's 2 ways to win a negotiation. There's one way to lose it. The 2 ways to win are, 1, you get what you want, you give the other person what they want, and you improve the relationship. That's one way. The other way is you realize you can't get what you want, and maybe you can give them what they want, but it's not enough for you and you got to leave, or you got to end the negotiation. That's still winning. The one way to lose is you continue, you take a kind of half sort of like, don't like, not sure, hoping that things will get better without really voicing your concerns. And then it kind of continues, and you take a lot of time realizing eventually that it won't work. So it's not always that way, but you got to voice, you got to be clear about, if you're going to enter the deal and have a relationship, you got to be a little bit open, at least, about what you want, what you don't want, diplomatically, but
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nobody's psychic, right? You got to say what you want if you want it. No one can read minds. Okay. No, I like that. All right. So we're almost at time, but if you guys are interested in the handout, I'm going to be posting it in the comments, as well as a link to Dave's bio or profile on Hire Club's website, which you can also find it by going to hireclub.com/coaches. And you can book a free 20-minute intro call if you're interested in talking about negotiation and leveling up your career. But Dave, thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, had a good time.
Yeah, we'll probably talk again soon. All right. Have a great rest of your day.
You
Bye,
too.
everyone.
Take care.